There it goes. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for hopping on today. I'm excited to teach this class today. So I'm not sure. I saw some people here from New York, Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. Welcome. Thanks for chiming in. So today I'm gonna show you guys how to make a quilt block and how to attach it to a sweatshirt. So here's the one that I have in the write-up that with the instructions. Now, I'm not sure if everyone here is already familiar with quilting or has made a quilt before, but making a quilt block like this for a sweatshirt is a great place to get started. So myself, I'm actually kind of new to quilting. I just started learning how to quilt and the whole process just a couple months ago. And this is a great project to kind of get started. If you're wanting to quilt, a quilt has multiple blocks, and this is a great place to start, just creating one block to kind of see the process and how it works and go from there. And I used, this is a Michaels Gildan sweatshirt today, which I like to use an oversized sweatshirt because then you can fit a decent size block on it. But I'll kind of go into how you can resize a quilt block, all that too, if you have a smaller sweatshirt. But so, and is anyone here, completely new to quilting, maybe wanting to start out? Well, regardless, I wanted to tell you guys a little bit before we kind of dive into it. So there's lots of ways you can start a quilt as far as the design you want, the size, all of that. There's templates online. You can go crazy and measure it out how you want. But actually, before I kind of go into the project, so here at Singer, we have a software called My Sewnet, and there's a quilting side of it, which is completely free to use, where you can go in and you can pick out a design for a quilt, put in your colors, all of that, and it gives you not only step-by-step measurements or instructions, but all of the measurements. So if you're brand new to quilting, you can go into the software, put in your fabric, and it will take you along all the way. And that's actually how I made this sweatshirt. So I made this one by cutting it out by hand with the measurements from My Sewnet Quilting. But we also just launched a new integration. So at Singer, we have a craft cutting machine called the Singer Memento, which is, it cuts all types of materials, but it also cuts fabric. And so for the project we're doing today, and for instance, this quilt block back here, I actually didn't even have to measure or cut the fabric at all. I put it into my quilting software, and then I hit send to Memento, and they sell the Memento right at michaels.com. And I loaded my fabric onto the mats, and it cut all of my shapes out for me perfectly accurate. So it kind of makes quilting a lot easier, and especially if you're brand new to it. So I'll show you later the finished block, but I was going to kind of start off by showing you guys. So
Harley, just real quick, you got some new quilters, you got some people that haven't quilted in a while, some limited experience, so you got a whole gamut of
awesome
quilters today.
And if you are an experienced quilter, this software and the integration, as well as I was talking about, is still amazing. It takes the time and the guesswork out of measuring, and sometimes I will say, and later when I show you so this one, when I cut it, there's a few parts where it's a little, it's not perfectly even, and that's probably my rotary cutter slipped a little bit, or my measuring was just a tad bit off. But using that software and the integration is absolutely amazing. So that's just something I want to mention if you are getting into quilting and wanting to start, even if you don't have a Memento, you can still get the measurements there and design it to kind of get the layout, because that's the one thing, is like envisioning it once you get your colors and how you want it to look. So I was going to kind of start first by showing you guys. So when I went into the software, I picked first my design. So I showed you this other, this block up here. I think this is called like the Flying Dutchman. That's one of the designs, but if you want to make one from scratch, you can, or you can pick preset design. So this is one of the designs where I just put in one block. But the one on the sweatshirt I just showed you is a friendship star. This one's called an Ohio star. So what I did was I picked out the actual block. This is just 2x2, but if you're doing just one, and then I went and I picked my colors. So this is the fabrics I wanted to use for this specific block we're doing today. Now I already sewed it together a little bit. I sewed one row here in this section, but I'm going to show you how to sew together the one row and then piece it together. Now I knew that these were the fabrics that I wanted to use for this quilt block. So I went into the software and I put in the color, so then I could kind of envision it. Then from there, you can see how you would lay it out, all of that. But let me show you. So once you, this is how I did my sweatshirt currently, the one that I said I manually cut myself. So you can go in and it will show you the exact measurements of your shapes, how to per color. And we also have a conversion chart as well to help with all that online, but it tells you, and this is if you wanted to add the borders as well. So it's a really easy way to get started in quilting. It takes the guesswork out of it and it can take you right along. So then once you have your fabrics, you cut it out to size, then it tells you the instructions how to lay it out. So this is super helpful too to like envision it. So you can see here, like this is piecing it together exactly how you're gonna lay it out. And then to start. So then after that, once you have it laid out how you want for the one block, you can go to the instructions. And this is a great place. If you're brand new like me, when the first quilting project I ever did was making this Michael sweatshirt. So you'll see here it says like with the arrows. So this triangle to this triangle, this triangle to this triangle. That's one section. So you would do those parts first. And then you would go down here and then you would sew the square to the one side, the other square. So then you would create rows. So you would do this, sew those two to the big block, the small squares to there. And so it's really easy to take you along the process. And then you get where you sew the 3 rows together. So I'm not going to sew the complete every shape together today. I'm not going to show you that, but I will show you, doing 1 row and then piecing the 2 rows together. And then I'm going to show you how you put it onto your sweatshirt. So now that I have that, and again, that's called My Sewnet, the quilting software. It's completely free to use. You go to mysewnet.com, you can download it. So if you are wanting to put, start quilting and make a quilt block sweatshirt, that is a great resource. All right, so now let's get to the actual sewing. So before we do anything, you want to make sure you have the right feet. So this is a 1/4 inch foot, and what it does is when you quilt, you always want to make sure you use a 1/4 inch seam allowance from the edge of the fabric. So now there's a few variations of a 1/4 inch sewing foot. Some of them might look a little different, but the one that I'm using today, it looks like this. So what I would do is as I sew along the edge, you want to make sure that this edge here is lined up with the edge of your fabric. And that way it will give you a perfect 1/4 inch all the way. And the reason why it's important to use these feet is because if you don't use one, you might be using a regular presser foot and think you're sewing at a 1/4 inch, but it's really easy to slide inward or outward. And if you get uneven seams throughout your quilt block, that will cause, like I was saying with my sweatshirt, how it looks a little uneven. The matter of like a centimeter, it can make all the difference. So using that 1/4 inch foot to help it stay even all the way. And then when you press your seams, you'll have that perfect block at the end. So I'm just going to put it on my presser foot, my 1/4 inch foot to start. And I'm going to show you one more time. So right now we're going to use a plain straight stitch to start, and we're going to sew together this top row here, piece it together. And I'm going to show you, where did I just put those papers? Back to the instructions to kind of show you. So you'll see here, these 3 triangles. What we're gonna do first is we're gonna piece this yellow one to this pink one, and then we'll do the opposite side. So when you piece them together, they might seem a lot larger. Like you might look at this like, why is that row so much bigger? But remember that seam allowance causes it to shrink. And then that's why if you use the same seam allowance all the way throughout, it will be even once we sew it all together. So first, what you want to make sure you do is when you match it up is you want to have these top corners even. So I'm going to match it up here. And this side will hang off a little bit, but when we fold it over and then we sew the opposite side, you won't even notice that. Now, when you sew this together, you could use sewing pins or clips, but because it is such a short line, I just even it out and then I'm going to match it up with my presser foot and sew right along here. And you don't even need to do a back stitch. I'm just going to sew one straight line, and then I would fold it and add the opposite side. So now I'm going to go back to my machine camera. And like I said, I'm just using a plain straight stitch. So you can see here, zoom just a tad bit. Where this edge of my presser foot is, I'm gonna match it up right on that edge. Start right on that very corner. I'm tucking in here. So, and then make sure it's nice and lined up. And because it is on the bias, you just try not to stretch it. Let me zoom back out. Point. Take it off. All right. So you can see a nice 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that side is sewn together. So now we come back over here. You can see it visually. And then I'm gonna have this one folded over this way, and then I'm gonna put on my opposite side. And then when I fold this one, it will be similar, the shape down here. And you could press this throughout as well. It's hard for me to get the iron in the shots where I'm sitting, so I will not really show you pressing today, but throughout these, you could always stop and press your seams as you're sewing the blocks. You can see there's that first block we made, first part of the top row. Now, what you would do is you would want to press these seams throughout, and a good recommendation is I always like to press towards the dark fabric, and I'll show you later why that's important, because if you have a really light fabric, like if this was white and you had a darker fabric here and you pressed it this way, the yellow isn't too bad, but if you had a really dark fabric, you would see that. And then when you put it on your sweatshirt, you would see those lines. So I always recommend pressing away from the light fabric. So I'm gonna keep switching back and forth. So now we have this here. I wish I had a mini press over here, but now, as I already have these ones done, now it's gonna be the squares. So first we're gonna do one square on this side. Same thing where you just match it up. Now squares are pretty even, so if this little part here is hanging off on the top, that's okay. Don't worry about it. You can always snip those later also. But quilting it's fun once you get into it because it's just taking a bunch of shapes and piecing them together and making art. And there's square on the other side. You really have to mess with it too because it might slide just a tad bit. And we made that top row. That was so easy. See how fast that went? So now we have the 3 rows, and I already pieced, like, so obviously after I did that, you would normally sew these 2 here, these 3. But now I'm gonna piece the rows together to complete the block. So when you do this part, obviously I would have it pressed out pretty well. I don't have that today. But you wanna make sure it's matched up with these sides here, because sometimes if you accidentally slide over a little bit, that's how your star can get misaligned. So you wanna make sure when you press it down and you fold it over like this, that you have your center points and your sides here to the stars matched up. Now, sometimes, depending on how you cut it out, or like I was saying on my sweatshirt, it did get a little on the line, and that's okay, especially if you're brand new at quilting, but and sometimes this is a part where if you have it, depending on how you pressed it, these lines might fold one way or the other, but I'm gonna just press them into each other like that.
Is this where if you did have a couple pins, it might be useful?
Yes. And I do not know where to put my little hedgehog. I'm gonna actually add a clip maybe. One clip here. Just to hold those. But yes, good point. The smaller shapes definitely fly by, but that'll help me. And if you're wondering why I said hedgehog, I feel like not everyone obviously tunes into every class. I have a hedgehog that holds my pins. It's a little stuffed animal. Okay. There's lots of cool templates out there for different types of quilt blocks. These are obviously like traditional shapes and patterns, but I saw one the other day that was like a house that you piece together the shapes and it made a house. So depending on what you want to add to your sweatshirt, or there's lots of ways you could go. You could even add and upcycle an old quilt. I hope I told you guys this, but I'm using the Singer C, which means computerized 5950 today. This is a great machine for beginners, and it's really good for quilting. Also, it has a good selection of stitches. So now I showed on that top row, and it looks pretty even to me. I don't know. So then you'll do the bottom row here. So that really went along quickly. I honestly probably could have sewed the whole thing together in the amount of time I have, but so same thing, I would want to press that out. Then I'm gonna flip this side, match it up. Oh, Sonny brought my hedgehog. So I'm gonna add a pin or two here. So the bottom row.
So Carly, everyone's being pretty quiet on the chat today, but I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Where did you find that cute fabric?
Yeah, I got this fabric right at Michael's. They have fabric now. I don't know. I know they've been selling it for a little bit now, but I like their selection. Especially the smiley face one, but all this fabric right at Michael's. I actually got it at Michael's.com. You can also buy their fabric online.
Carly, will you go over the seam allowance again? What size did
Yeah.
you use?
So it's 1/4 of an inch. Let me go back here. I'm gonna move this down. So I'm using white thread, so it's a little hard to see. But you see here how it's like this 1/4 of an inch from the edge. So all the way down, all your pieces, that way throughout your whole block, it will be even and you don't have any. Now when I open it up, see how it's a square? There's not any edges. If you were using different, I mean, this one hangs off just a tad bit, but if you were using different seam allowances throughout or accidentally and didn't have that 1/4 inch foot, and I can show you again under this camera, you would notice it. So that's why it's important to stay within 1/4 of an inch. So what I did was, as I sewed along these edges, this part of the foot, this flat edge, you line it up with the side, and that is what is your guide. So as long as you keep this flat side lined up with the edge of your fabric as you're sewing, that gives you a perfect 1/4 inch all throughout. Now your machine also has, it might have a 1/4 inch marker on your stitch plate, but that is the best way I would say. And some 1/4 inch feet actually allow you to switch and do either side. This one just has the bar right here on this side. So definitely if you're getting into quilting, you're gonna want a 1/4 inch foot because that is the standard seam allowance. Perfect. All right. So now we have our block done. Okay. So say you want to put it on a sweatshirt. Let me go back to my wide camera and show you this one. Now, like I was saying, I used this block, I believe is 14 by 14, but you can resize it. So that's another thing. If you're using that software, say you wanted to make a really small block, even like a deck, like one that would just be like here, or I made one for a hat. You can make it down to like 3 inches wide. And what you would do is you would just resize it to the dimensions you want. And then on that chart I showed you, it will adjust all of your measurements for what you need to cut out to be exactly that size. So if you want to cut really tiny shapes, it will change it to be that for you. It's way easier than, you know, doing the math. And I'm terrible at math. And when I first started quilting, I was like, wait, hold on, let me think about this. So that software is amazing because it kind of takes the math out of it for you. So what you're going to do is, once you have your quilt block done, and you can tell this block, I actually resized this one to be smaller. So this one was 14 by 14. I can't even remember what I made this one, but I think I sized it down to like 12 inches, but you can see here, it's definitely a little bit smaller. Because I was like, you know what, it took up pretty much the whole sweatshirt. I wanted to just be a tad bit smaller. So I resized this one to just be a bit smaller. Now, sewing it onto the sweatshirt. There's lots of ways to do this. I'm going to use a decorative stitch today and show you that. But first, you know, you could just pin it to the sweatshirt, but what I'm going to show you is seam a seam too. So it is, and they also sell this at Michael's. You probably will recognize the logo like that. So what it is, it's this kind of adhesive, fusible, and it's really cool because it has 2 sides. So first you can take off this paper, it's like a wax paper, and you would place your block, and it has a little bit of a stickiness to it, so it helps stick to your fabric. So you would take off the first side. Where did I put my block? Okay. And you're gonna want to cut it to size. This one I actually realized yesterday that if you have it a little bit bigger and then cut it to size after, that's fine. It might be so that way your edges don't fray. This one might just be a tad bit smaller. But I'm gonna lay it on top of the first sticky side. And then another thing I want to note that I learned the hard way is when you lay it down before you iron it, you might notice if you don't cut any, like, especially if you're using a darker thread or a darker fabric, you don't really see any right now. I think mine's gonna look okay, but sometimes you might have these random loose threads that will pop up from the edges. And if you're using a lighter fabric, you can see that later. So let me show you what happened when I made this sweatshirt. And I didn't realize it till after I ironed it, so I couldn't really go back. But you see these threads here? They came from off the blue fabric, and they got flipped around when I pressed it, and I didn't realize it, and then you could see it through the yellow thread. And I was super mad at myself. But that was, like I said, I was learning. So this is a thing to know. Before you place that adhesive and you iron it on, look out for those threads. You can go and trim them and make sure they're out of the way, or that's maybe because you want to press towards the dark fabric. So I actually press this more towards the lighter fabric, this learning experience. So you can make sure you trim those out of the way so you won't see them. So, and you can see here, like I press this darker fabric towards the pink, so you can see kind of that purple trim. So just kind of play around with how you press it. So as you see here, let me pull this out pieces. So it isn't, I haven't pressed it yet, so it's not fully stuck, so I can take it off. But when you go and press this, you're gonna want to play around with which way you press the seams, whether you're doing it this way or this way away from the dark. And then later you can snip those little edges there. But once you get it laid nice and flat, you trim all these loose threads so they're not in the way of your. You just take some scissors, make sure you trim all these threads. And I'm gonna like snip these just to kind of show you guys. And you could do this the method I'm doing this on a sweatshirt. You could honestly add it to, you know, a denim jacket or other types of garments, other types of projects. Doesn't have to be a sweatshirt, but I know that I feel like that's kind of trendy right now. I've been seeing a lot of Quilt sweatshirts. So, of course, when I made this, it was cold, and now it's getting warm out. But okay, I've trimmed it up a bit there. So just want to make sure you get those out of the way. So when you press it, you don't see those little threads. You could also add some batting behind it, which I didn't do for this project, but if you wanted to add some of the actual like quilted look, you know, add some batting and then go around to do that also. I think it still has a quilted look because once you sew it onto the sweatshirt or the like batting look. So again, now I have thread on my sticky side of this, but this isn't going to be my final project. So just to kind of show you. So you would lay it here, and first you would press it on this side. So it sticks to this side. Then the cool thing about steam machine too is you would take off this other paper on the back. Once it's gonna fuse to here, and then you'll pull this off, and this side will be like melted on there. You pull this off, and then you're gonna lay it on the front of your sweatshirt, getting it even where you want it, centered, and then you're gonna press it again, and then this side will then stick to your sweatshirt. So let me show you. I have another sweatshirt that I already made another block, same block. So now you can see how good that looks. So I used the steam machine yesterday, and I pressed it on there, nice and good. So what you're gonna do now is you're gonna sew around the outline of the block. Now you can use a decorative stitch. There's lots of ways you could do this. And I honestly, I'm just gonna sew, I'm not gonna, you could go right against the edge. There's so many options you could do, but I think I'm gonna do this little kind of zigzag stitch. So let me show you guys. So on my machine, these are all my decorative stitches. And I'm going to use this one, this little squiggly one, 18, because I felt like it kind of went with the smiley faces. And if you have the frayed look, I think that's okay how it frays on the side, but using the steam machine, if you put it right up to the edge. So this sweatshirt, you can see how it frayed a little bit. That's because I honestly, my steam seam, I didn't put it right to the very edge, but if you put it right to the very edge, it shouldn't fray like this. But I kind of wanted it to fray, honestly. I thought it was the look I was going for, but if you put the steam seam right to the edge, it will also prevent that from fraying. So, which is what I did on this one. Now, I always like to ask the class about, so I'm going to do my top decorative stitch, and I have yellow, and I have a light pink. So I was wondering what you guys think I should use color-wise. The yellow or the white pink on the gray sweatshirt. Let me know in the comments.
Take a minute. We've got one for yellow, one for pink, another for pink.
I feel like there's always ends up being a tie.
Yeah.
So
Oh, another yellow. You got 3 yellows, 2 pinks.
all right, it might be yellow. Okay, we're gonna go with yellow. Oh,
Everyone pink. It's a tie.
let me go back to the, so, okay. Let's see.
You're actually getting more yellows now.
More yellow? Okay.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna do yellow too, because just because with the gold in the middle also. So we're gonna do yellow. And I'm gonna show you guys, so before now we're gonna take off that 1/4 inch foot. So now that we're done, you know, you honestly can't even use this because of the way that the needle will sit and the way, because my needle is gonna move a lot to do that, the squiggles. So I'm gonna take off my 1/4 inch foot and I'm gonna use an open toe foot. This one's a clear one, but there's lots of types of feet that are good for decorative stitches. So you want to make sure you have the right foot on to use a decorative stitch, because I literally just did this earlier before class. I was practicing like picking which stitch I wanted, and I forgot just naturally like to put on this foot, and I broke a needle because it went to do a squiggle in it. Because you'll see with a 1/4 inch foot, it only has an opening right in the middle. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, before you do a decorative stitch, I always say practice your stitch to make sure, one, you get it like the length and width you like, but also, you know, you want to see it visually before you. So here I was like playing around with a couple of decorative stitches. There's a few thicker ones, but I don't know. I'm really feeling the, can't really see it because the thread's white, but that's the one I'm going to be using today. So I'm going to rethread with my yellow.
And Carly, they're saying it's kind of a little darker yellow, a goldish yellow.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's kind of more the color of the smileys versus the triangles.
And some more pink ones,
Oh,
but I
no.
think you've committed.
Watch me do it, and then I'm gonna. That's the one thing about sewing is I always like later on wish I'll be like, oh, I should have did this or use that color, but. So I got my yellow thread in there, and I'm not going to change my bobbin thread just because you're not going to see it. It's going to be on the bottom on the inside of the sweatshirt, so I'm not too worried about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do my decorative stitch all the way around my block, and I'm going to just start at this top corner here, and that's where I'm going to end. So you'll go all the way around. Let's look at that. Okay. Oh, one thing I almost just forgot. I almost just put my sweatshirt under there. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure you open it up so you don't sew your sweatshirt closed. So I'm actually gonna take off my accessory tray for this part. So you have this free arm. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. There we go. So you have this open accessory arm here, so you can move your sweatshirt in and out and just have more room to sew. I actually might start at a different part now that I think about it. So it's gonna slide it in like that because you want to make sure you don't sew these two sides together. Or you could just push this out of the way, whichever you prefer. Just make sure you don't sew 2 layers together. And I've done that. It's not fun. All right, I'm gonna actually start in this bottom corner here.
Carly, which stitch were you choosing again?
So I'm gonna use this, let me zoom back in. All the way over here. So let me focus. Okay. I'm gonna use stitch number 18, this little squiggly one. Now I want to make sure before I start, because it's still in the straight stitch, that I switch it to the right one. So this machine, if you have a machine with a lot of decorative stitches, sometimes you have to put it on a new setting. So this one does have extra stitches. So you see how there's like this symbol here that represents these stitches. This double star symbol represents all of these stitches. There's also a little, I don't know if you guys can't see right now, there's a little card down here that has additional stitches, but I gotta make sure I put it to the double star. So now it's gonna let me pick these stitches, and I'm gonna put in number 18. And go up to 18. And I think the setting, I'm gonna just you know what, this is where I said I'm gonna double check it first. I wanna make sure that my length or my width, all of that of my squiggles. I don't know if the right word is squiggles. How would you say that, Sonny? That stitch. But I'm gonna double check it really quick and make sure I have it on the setting I like. Always use scrap fabric because seam ripping is never fun. So I'm gonna just bump it down the width a tiny bit. Not, oh, you know what I did? I put on 16 on accident. I was like, what the heck? It's going all over. Okay, there we go. Take it out. I think that's a good, I like that. So now that I have it set on the length and width that I want, I will put it back. And I'm gonna line up the edge of my presser foot with the edge of my block. But if you were using, let me show you again the stitches, because on the other sweatshirt, I used one that had a little bit more of a line. So I like went right along the edge. So you can play around, there's lots of options. And let me show you again. This one I used, I believe I used 47 on this sweatshirt. So you can see, kind of looks like little arrows almost. That's the one I used on this one. Because I wanted to kind of, because the raw edge was not kind of fraying, so I went right along that. Sometimes before you start, I like to just put my presser foot down manually to kind of see, or not my presser foot, my needle, to see where it's really going to start. So, yeah. And now you're just going to go all the way around. Making sure I'm in. And I'm going to bump up my speed just a tad bit. I had my speed lever on a little slower. If you were using a really thick sweatshirt or like a, denim jacket, I would always just advise, you might have to change up the length and width or even your type of needle that you're using for that. When I get to the corner, I'm gonna turn my hand wheel just a little bit, so I'm in a good spot to then pivot. So then I'm gonna make sure my needle's down. pivot on that corner of the block. And then I'm going to turn it this way. Make sure your bottom's still out of the way. Press it right back down and then just continue on.
Carly, while you're finishing up that side, do you have a needle preference for doing this?
I'm using a standard universal needle. I believe it's a 80. But I mean, like I said, if you're maybe using a denim jacket or a different type of material, you might want to go a little bit stronger. But a standard universal needle would be fine, I think, for the sweatshirt. And then get to my corner, lower my needle, and then pivot. And as you get around these parts, your sweatshirt's gonna get a little bunched up in here, so it's just gonna take a little bit of readjusting. And I don't know if you guys can see it so far. Let me zoom in. You can see that, but the yellow is hard to see. The little squiggles are right there. It's cute. All right, so let me just bring back out. Especially here, this is a part where you would accidentally, you might be sewing along and this bottom part could get caught up. So just make sure as you go, you keep readjusting, and kind of like if you have ever done machine embroidery. I don't know if anyone was in my class last time, but I talked about doing a sweatshirt machine embroidery, and you know, you want to just make sure to keep it up and out of the way.
I don't know if it's Angie or Ange, but she's gonna use her block on a bag, which is
Nice.
great.
I wish I had some examples on here, because when we just launched that integration with the Memento to make quilt blocks, and I made a bunch, like, you don't even have to, you know, I made a bunch of quilt blocks and I actually turned them into not a quilt, but I made like one of the quilt blocks, I actually was this exact one that I have hanging. I made it into a dog bandana, and then another one I made into a little drawstring bag. So there's lots of ways you can, you know, make a quilt block, and you don't even have to necessarily make a quilt or put it on something. You could use that as a fabric and then, you know, make stuff. So little bit more and try and meet back up with where I started. Scissors here. But any other questions or anything? I feel like, as you can see, it's a lot easier than you would think, especially with the instructions from my Sona. It makes it step by step a lot easier. But now we have a book block. I'm going to show you again on here.
Oh, yeah, you can see that.
There's my squiggles all the way. I think they look cute with the smileys.
Yep.
So let me just, I'm gonna go to the around the office the rest of the day and show off my work. But I hope you guys, I know we ended a bit early, but I hope you guys all try it out, and whether you're putting on a sweatshirt or something else. And I would love to see your creations if you tag Learn with Michaels. But thank you guys all for tuning in. Is there any other questions or comments today?
Love it. Awesome. Nice.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
You do have one next time.
Oh yeah, actually, if you tune in to the next class, me and Sonny are actually going to be teaching, not necessarily a project, we're going to be showing some techniques. So we're going to be talking about buttonholes, and how to sew a button on with a button foot. And we're also going to be talking about bird's nests, how they happen and why they happen. So if anyone here is a new sewer and you ever had that, your machine gets all jammed up and you have a bird's nest, we're going to go over all the problems, why that happens, and what you can do to resolve it. And a couple other techniques as well, and just like different types of bobbins and types of machines. So thank you guys.